And we welcome everybody into No Layups, David Nuno and Raheel Ramzanali. You look so much taller than me, Raheel, here. I got to fix my. Can't have the co-host taller than the other host.
I had to put my computer on like a box because it was overheating. So I'm a little bit taller because of that. It's to make up for my lack of height. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and put this on a box. So that's what I'm gonna do.
Can we put the Astros in some kind of box to protect them? We got a lot on the show today, by the way. Tom Abrams, one of my favorite guys ever. Obviously, he anchors the weekend news, political reporter, does it all. He's going to be joining us here in a minute. But we got a couple sports topics that I want to get into. Obviously, Alex Bregman goes down is the big one. Another Astro goes down big time. And then the Rockets in the playoffs here are going to be playing. Can they take a 2-0 lead over Oklahoma City? And the national narrative, Dame getting love, Kawhi gets love for obvious reason. James Harden, though, does seem to be slept on from a national perspective, even though he's done some amazing things, Raheel.
Yeah, so I want to start with that real quickly because it's so weird, right? Like we as sports fans, we always want all the love, right? For our city, for our players. And that's part of being a sports fan. You want that. And I understand that. But what I don't get is being in sports radio for as long as I've been and you've been, we hear from the fans all the time. We hear from fans on our comments and all that. I think fans forget, and I think media members too forget this. There's not a finite amount of love that is out there. Like there's not only 100 units of love for X amount of players to split. Just because Dame Lillard gets love doesn't mean that James Harden is appreciated any less or more. Like you can have two things. You can have two great players, three great players, right? When you think back in the 90s, Michael Jordan was obviously the greatest, but at that same time, you had Hakeem Olajuwon, right, getting his love. You had Patrick Ewing in New York
Right.
getting his, and David Robinson, and so on and so on, Charles Barkley. There's not just a finite amount of love. And I think fans forget that. Like you're not fighting for X amount. You can have Dame Lillard and give his moment and say that, wow, that was incredible. Like what he did was incredible. At the same time, it can be fair that Giannis did something incredible and James did. We forget that, and again, we're in this market, so that's what I'm focused on. I'm not sure how it is in other markets, but that was just something that like it was bothering me so much.
Well, let me throw this out there too, because what I think part of the conversation is how likable are you? Now, I think James Harden's a very likable guy in a different kind of way. He does put a smile on his face. He knows how to turn it on for the fans, but he's a little bit different in the way he goes about himself. I don't want to say he's socially awkward because he's not, but he's just James is James. It's a different kind of guy, right? Oh, hey, Ricardo wants us to subscribe to his YouTube channel. That's a perfect place to do it. And I think that's the thing with James. Like Lillard, there's a very likable quality and a different way of Lillard, and I think his is more. I don't want to compare him to Kobe because I think that's such an easy thing. But the way Lillard is gonna tell you he beat you and how he beat you, right? James is a little more quiet when he does it. He'll give you the little what do you call it? Stir the what do you call it? The
So the
ingredients?
cooking, the
Yeah.
chef, yeah.
I'm not
With Dame, like we forget last year he got to the conference finals. Now they got swept, and he had a great shot against Oklahoma City that eventually got Russell Westbrook out of Oklahoma City and here to Houston because it broke up that entire team. He's also sent home the Houston Rockets and James Harden, but in 2015 when James specifically got to the conference finals, right, on his own. That was his team. I know Dwight was there and he played pretty well in that playoff run. And they had, Josh Smith, and you had all those guys have that game 6 moment. He was getting this kind of love in 2015, just like Dame is. It's just we as humans do get used to certain things. Like
you get used
James
to
putting it,
greatness too, don't
yeah,
you?
you get used to it. Absolutely. You can make an argument that LeBron should win the most valuable player every single year, right? But you get used to it. Like that's your expectations change, right? And that's where we are with James Harden. The expectations have changed. Now, when you get to the finals, when you win an NBA championship, hopefully one day for the Houston Rockets, I think all that love is going to be there for him. It's just now we get used to it. Dame is just now entering a point in his career where he's coming off the conference finals. He is redefining his own game, having big moments. So, of course, we're going to celebrate that as sports fans.
I'm going to bring this up. I've told you before. I'm probably one of the only people who can compare James Harden to Dirk Nowitzki, and this is how.
Mm-hmm.
I was in Dallas with Dirk. I worked for the Mavericks for a few years, and I covered them as a member of the media as well. And Dirk got the same kind of scrutiny, I would say. People thought he was slept on. People thought he couldn't win. They thought he didn't have a jaw, that he couldn't take a left hook. We saw what happened when the 1-8 series with the Golden State Warriors. What year was that? Like
That was
2011?
after,
No,
yeah,
before 2010, 9, whatever it was.
yeah.
So no, excuse me, that was before that, wasn't it? It
It
was
was
like
before that.
2006.
It was
2006.
it was the year didn't it was a year after they got to the championship, the finals, right? Because it
So
was yeah,
yeah, '07 then. So
'07, yeah.
and I remember the same kind of stuff being said about Dirk Nowitzki. He couldn't win it. People slept on him. XYZ. He wins the championship, and now some people say that he is, underrated. That he's ahead of Larry Bird. Some people, not all. I'm just saying, like, so winning a championship changes the complete perception of a player. It changes it all, and I think that's what we're seeing with James. If James, and by the way, I hate to say this, I'm drinking the Rockets Kool-Aid right now because not only the West, the entire NBA is wide open, and there's no Golden State Warriors. There's no home court advantage. It's just go out there and ball. And I
Yep.
Look, anybody can win it, but why not the Rockets?
Yeah, there's no mental hurdles either, right? Like if you are a lower seeded team, we saw this yesterday with the Clippers and the Dallas Mavericks. Just because you lost game 1, there's not this mental hurdle of, oh man, we're not going to flip home court. Now it's just the race to 4 games, right? As you mentioned, no home court advantage, there's no fans, there's no travel either. This is literally, how good are you at basketball and can you get 4 wins? Don't worry, in 7 games, right? Like there's no more travel, there's no more flipping series, there's no more we have to do this in these next 2 games and all of that. There's no hangovers either. Like you saw this with Toronto. Just because you win game 1 doesn't mean you're going to relax game 2. Even though it was a closer game, they still won game 2, right? And I don't think any of this 8-1 series, the Lakers, they've had flaws all bubble long. That's like the period, right? The restart games. And those are just being shown on a true playoff level now because you're playing a team that, again, was in the conference finals. This is a good team. They just were injured the first part of the year. So now all these flaws will be exposed, and there's no more like, oh, we can't do this because we're an 8 seed. No, it's just go win 4 games and move on.
Hey, I want to continue this dialogue. I also want to talk about Alex Bregman because I didn't believe there were such thing as sports gods or baseball gods. Man, they came after the Astros, bro. Like, I mean, just think about the all-stars that are injured. Not everybody else. Your Cy Young winner in Justin Verlander. Your Rookie of the Year in Yordan Alvarez. A all-star in Michael Brantley. Alex Bregman, the runner-up for the MVP. Who am I missing? I know Baggiani, not in the same kind of category.
Yeah.
Roberto Osuna.
Osuna's out. Your closer's out, so they're going closer by committee now. It is a mess right now for the Houston Astros. And some of that can be chalked up to, well, you only had 2 weeks of spring training, right? The restart spring training. You had 2 weeks, and now you're all of a sudden going from 0 to 100. And guess what happens? This is happening across Major League Baseball, the injuries.
Nobody's getting hurt like the Astros.
No, not like that. Absolutely not. But everyone's getting hurt. Like this is going to happen, right? When you ramp it up. Former Major League Baseball players have talked about it. That it's a tough thing for a pitcher to go from 0 to 100 and not expect any kind of injuries, forearm soreness. But with guys like Brantley, Bregman, Yordan, Yordan's slide was like, oh, do we need to do that? Brantley, it's like, oh, come on. Like, it's just one of those like low ticky-tacky injuries. Bregman pulls the hamstring. So these are things that are going to happen. But the Astros, you're right, man. This is a rude awakening from the sports gods, the baseball gods. And
baseball gods.
Baseball
and
gods,
I think baseball writers.
Yeah, baseball writers.
Yeah,
that's
it.
When they're not busy complaining about, grand slams and players having fun, they're out there injuring teams that cheated.
Hey, by the way, 30 seconds I'm going to bring on Tom. I understand the whole, unwritten rules and this and that. Does it have to be this big of a deal? Hey, I didn't like that he did it, but whatever, he did it. Move on, right? Can it be just that? Can it just be that? Uh-oh.
Okay.
You just got called out on the
I
chat
know.
by
I
Eduardo.
told you my mic like keeps adjusting its volume on its own. I told you it was going low. See, you didn't believe me, but I fixed that. Hopefully, here's what I think. Okay, unwritten rules in baseball, they're there for a reason. Here's why: because it makes the writers feel more important. It makes players in baseball feel more important than they really are. But here's the main purpose: it's the only way we care about baseball, in my opinion.
Oh,
Like we love
stop.
no here. We love our Astros. We love our Astros. We watch them. We love their stories. How often do you watch other baseball games? How often do you care about other storylines until there's a flare up with the unwritten rules? Never.
Uh, well, I think it depends on. There's a lot of baseball purists, buddy, that can
Yep.
watch any baseball game. Just like, people ask me, how the heck do you watch soccer? I love it. I love the drama of it. I love it all. There was a time I didn't. It just kind of depends what storylines you're into. I'll tell you a good storyline. We're not going to get into politics on this show, okay? Because I want to keep our viewers, all 9 of them. But our next guest is not only a political reporter, an anchor, sports enthusiast, my friend. We have worked together on the weekends for many, many years. Tom Abrams joining the show. Hello, Tom.
Hey guys, what's up?
What's
So,
up,
Raheel,
Tom?
I got a story for you.
Yeah,
I
tell me.
I got a story for you, Raheel. I forget what year it was. I'm very bad with years. My dad, you can say, remember when Joe DiMaggio did this? He can tell you the exact day, the year, and he's 90. I don't know how he does it. I forgot the Texans, starters from last year. Tom and I were watching the Aggies play UCLA, I believe 3 years ago. Does that sound right?
Yeah, it was my daughter's freshman year there, so yes.
Okay. Kevin Sumlin was still the coach, so whatever, 4 years ago, 3 years ago. And the Aggies were up big at halftime. I don't know if it was 25-7, 35-7, something like that. And, Tom kind of walks by the sports office and goes, "Hey, man, your Aggies look good." I go, "Slow down, bud. They've blown these kind of leads many, many times." And literally that evening, UCLA came back, a historic comeback. And Tom and I had a little fun on the air about that. But, Tom, we always talk sports, man. That's what we do when we're on the set. And Batman.
We do. Yeah. DC versus Marvel and sports. Exactly.
Whoa, Tom, you're a Batman and comic book nerd like us?
A little more Marvel than
Okay,
DC.
that's fine.
Right?
That's fine.
But yes,
Yeah.
I mean, I my wife and kids would tell you that I am nothing if not a nerd.
Yeah. Shout out to Disney Plus. Thank you for putting all the movies on there. What's up, Disney Plus? Available right now. Subscribe. Don't forget, people.
Yeah. Are they a sponsor now?
No, I don't know. We're just
I think what
it's all
would
part
work
of the
is
same family.
Yeah, if you guys added this to maybe their premium lineup and people had to pay $29.99, they'd get Mulan and this podcast. I think that would sell.
See,
it's a winner for everybody.
Tom's officially part of the show now. He's part of he's part of brand management now. Okay,
Exactly.
He understands how to do this. Man, Tom, David has just been saying so many nice things. He's obviously talked about the stories. Man, first of all, and this is something I talk to David about all the time. It is so hard on TV for a person's personality to come across when you are presenting and talking about the news, but you do such a great job of that. Is that something that was natural to you, or is that something that took time for you?
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. You'll get your cut later. I just try to be myself. Very early on in the dark ages when I started doing this, I had I don't remember, it was a professor or somebody who worked at the TV newsroom in our college station just suggested, pretend that on the other end of that lens is, your best wife, your girlfriend, whatever at the time, and talk to that person. And so that's what I try to do. I mean, I have a much harder time actually speaking in front of a gymnasium full of people than I do talking on a camera, just because all I see is, that one person on the other side of the lens. So I try to just be myself. I mean, I don't know that my sarcasm doesn't come through on the air most of the time, which is probably my main personality trait. But I try to be relatable. I try to communicate in a way that makes people feel comfortable so that they'll not change the channel.
One of the beauties of working with Tom is, a lot of times when there's a toss between the anchor and sports, there's some chit chat about what we're going to talk about. Sometimes Tom and I have that chit chat, but a lot of times you just know what you'll bring a one-liner. You're current with sports. I mean, you are And I think having rapport with your co-anchors goes a long way there too.
I think, yeah, it does. It does. And we have great people who work at the station, and I love, I do love sports. When I was a kid, what I wanted to do, I wanted to write for Sports Illustrated. And I had boxes in a closet in my bedroom. I had boxes of every sports magazine you could get. There was, other than Sports Illustrated and Sporting News, there was also this magazine called Inside Sports. There was another one called Sport. I had all of them. And I would go through them. I would save them, categorize them by month and year. I loved sports. And then when I got to college, you had to be like a junior or senior to work at the radio station in sports, but news you could start after you had, decent grades your first semester. So I started with news, and I liked it enough that I thought, there are more jobs in news than there are in sports. Sports can be can be fun. I can cheer at a game if I'm not a sports reporter. So I went with news, but I still love sports.
Now, when you cover politics, the personalities in politics, do you prefer those, or do you prefer sports personalities just watching from the outside and looking in?
That's a good question.
Only the best.
Yeah. So, those are probably my two biggest pastimes in terms of things that I enjoy reading about and watching, politics and sports. And there are a lot of similarities. There's superstars and there's scrubs, and there are people who, you root for and people you don't. As a journalist, even though you're a hometown guy, sometimes you can't let people know who it is you're rooting for. Same in politics. There are a lot of similarities, which is why I think you'll find that a lot of political reporters at the very highest levels love baseball, right? There are a ton, George Will being one of them, but there are a ton of political reporters who love sports, particularly baseball, because there's a similarity in the way that, strategy and short-term, long-term gains and losses, the politics of everything. There are a lot of politics in sports, as you guys know very well. So, I think they're pretty comparable. I personally enjoy watching sports and being a fan. So from that perspective, I think I enjoy sports personalities more, just because I can say what I really think and yell at the screen.
Tom, take me back to 2016, covering the presidential race. You were everywhere. I think you lived on the road with our dear friend Willie Dixon, who passed away a couple months back. Just to talk to us about that. You were there with Trump. You were there with Ted Cruz. You were everywhere.
Yeah, it was great. The station really afforded me the opportunity, mainly because Cruz was in it and he's a Houstonian, for us to travel. And we did. We went, it was 20-something states. And it started actually in 2014. I think the end of 2014. We went to South Carolina with Ted Cruz and spent a couple of days with him as he was beginning to lay the groundwork, and spent the next better part of 2 years covering it. And the best story, I think, was when Cruz won Iowa. We had already planned they invited us to travel with them from Iowa to New Hampshire to South Carolina in a 24-hour period. This is a couple weeks out, and the station agreed. We were the only Texas TV station to go. And so right after Cruz wins Iowa, we rush to the airport. We do our 10 o'clock live shot. We shoot something for the morning. We rush to the airport. I start writing a story for the 4:30 or 5 a.m. We get on this private plane with, maybe 20 other journalists, Cruz and his family and his top aides. We're flying, and Willie's editing as we're on the way to New Hampshire. We get there I want to say it's 4 a.m, and we land, and as soon as we land, I get a text from the station asking if I could do a live shot. Right? We haven't slept because we've been working to get stuff done. And if my first reaction, I can't say publicly, but then I thought about it. I'm like, well, by the time we're done with everything we need to do, it's like 30 minutes. I might as well do the live shot. So we get bused to the hotel. We put together another story, and at 6 a.m. we're live. Then I think we got maybe about an hour of sleep, and Cruz had an event in another city in New Hampshire at 11, right when we were going live. So we had to cut an 11 o'clock piece. We go live from some other city in New Hampshire at 11, Then we cut a 4 o'clock piece before we get on the plane, and he's feeding it through the Degero, the device we use to feed things like cellular service. On the van back to the airport, he's feeding that story. Then we fly to South Carolina, and he feeds, I think, by 6 o'clock on the way, and it's raining and it's dark from in Columbia, South Carolina to the event. We're live from that event at 6. I write and track at 10 o'clock, and we feed it on the way back to the airport. And then when we get back to New Hampshire at, whatever, midnight, we then cut something for the next morning show. So it was a crazy, I don't know, 36 hours, but it was probably the most fun I've had.
Now, when you're with these politicians during their off time, right? Like when they're not at the rallies, they're not doing interviews, are they always on, or are they different in a sense? I know journalists around, like, you might not get a true sense of who they are, but what are they like when they're not on camera?
Sure. So, they're always, because I'm a reporter, they're always going to be a little guarded.
Mm-hmm.
But, conversations to begin with off the record are generally the best ones. And, I've had the opportunity to have pretty candid conversations with a fair number of politicians. And, most of them are just regular people when they're talking about their families, or they talk about sports, or they talk about things completely not politically related. And most of them are much more affable when they're just being themselves than, when they're on. And when the camera's on, there's a marked difference in the way that they talk, mm-hmm. or respond to questions. But yeah, I mean, there is a difference, and it's interesting to see, just like with TV, sometimes people are one way in the newsroom and one way on TV. And that's how it is, I think, with politicians. They have a public image, they have a public face, they have constituents, and then they can be themselves. So
Eduardo wants to know, is this a sports podcast? And my response to that is, sometimes. It kind of depends on the talking point. It's just topics that we enjoy talking about. And I'm going to now switch over to sports because our news director, Eduardo, told us to. No, I'm kidding. Tom, the Rockets, we've talked about them. I know you've gone to many games over the years. Every year, right around this time, there's a lot of excitement, especially since James Harden and D'Antoni linked up. But this year, I really don't know if there's a team that can beat them. I know it's wide open. There's not a Golden State Warriors. How do you see the Rockets?
Well, I think Westbrook, needs to be healthy. I think that's been one Achilles heel for the Rockets, right? Is that Harden plays a lot. And, some of the players on the team are a little older. And PJ Tucker, for example, he plays all out every game, right? So you play an 82-game schedule, and then the playoffs. By the time you get to the conference finals, they're beat. They don't have to worry about that right now. They also don't have to worry about opposing fans. They can just go out and play. I mean, the Rockets, in a lot of sense, kind of play street ball, and that it's a lot of isolation, and not other than clear out for James or Westbrook takes it to the hole. There's D'Antoni lets them play. And so if they can hold teams like they did in game one, if they can hold teams to close to 100 points, they're in good shape. I mean, because Harden's got fresh legs.
Yeah. I think across the league, you see that, right? Like, there's fresh legs now. Dame is doing what he's doing. James looks so good in game one. And a part of that, we talked about this too, David, is there's no longer the burnout factor. And I think this is so huge because that's why 8 can beat number 1 now, because they're not burnt out trying to make the playoffs, and 1 didn't get the advantage of resting like they normally might, right? Like, this is going to be such a wild NBA playoffs. It's unlike anything we've seen, in my opinion. And I know it's just one game, and I know it's just the 8 seed being the number 1 team one time, but I think as we progress, we're going to see some wild stuff.
One thing, and I kind of hate to say this as a Houston sports fan now, but if they were, it almost feels like, and I've almost said this to you, David, on the set a couple of times. Well, you're in your home studio, but I still almost said it to you. So it almost feels like this is set up with a bubble for the Rockets to win. because every time Houston wins a championship, there's always like this asterisk next to it, right? You know, the Rockets 2 titles. Well, Michael wasn't playing, and now the Astros with what the Astros did or didn't do. So it almost feels like this is the year the Rockets win it when you have this little asterisk. You know, oh, it was a shortened season and they won it in a bubble.
Well, in some regards, this may be a harder championship to win. I think it all depends on if your team wins, you're going to find glory in it, and if your team loses,
Oh,
you're
yeah.
not.
Yeah.
But I do want to ask you about the Astros because you obviously covered it from a World Series perspective, and also the scandal since. How do you see their place now? Has your view of them kind of skewed?
So I actually think you were on the air and we were sitting in the TV room and my son walks in and he just kind of stops and watches the story about the Astros and he goes, man, it's kind of hard to root for them right now. And that's kind of how I feel. Like I want to root for them. I like those guys, but it's really hard. It's really hard to get past it. So I don't find myself, you know, as disappointed by their losses or as excited by their wins as I did previously. That's just me. You know, I still like the Astros. I still want the Astros to do well. I just don't have the passion for them like I do for the Rockets, for example, where, you know, I check, I want to look at the box score. I want to know what happened. I don't feel that way with the Astros right now. As much as I want to see them be successful. And I'd love to see them win one. I really wish they'd won against the Nationals because then at least you could say, look, they got one anyway, so what does it matter? And I worry about their window, especially with this year. I worry about their window closing.
Yeah, and that window has been slammed. It seems like with the Justin Verlander injury, and by the good news, he was throwing off flat ground, so maybe that's signs of good things to come. But all these injuries are making it hard for this year, and like you can't even salvage the season this year with the trade deadline because of the trades that the Astros have already made previously. You don't have much to offer either, you know, in return for somebody that could get you over the hump because you're not even close to the hump right now.
And why would you do that this year, right? I mean, I almost feel like you kind of just almost say, I don't know. I mean, I know you don't do that as a professional athlete unless you're going for the number one pick, where you just throw the season. But I just kind of feel like I'm already looking at next year, and maybe that's just fatalist, but that's just kind of how I feel about it.
Tom, you think the NFL is going to be able to get a full season in?
Not unless they do something like the NBA. I mean, I know they're looking at a bubble type thing for the playoffs. I don't know why they wouldn't do that. I know if they're much bigger teams, you know, it's much more complicated for the NFL. But we've already seen the issue with baseball and travel, and football is among all of them. It's, you know, the most contact. How do you avoid it? And you know, Bob Slovak said it's one thing to start a season, it's another to finish it. And I don't know right now with the way things are right now. I don't know how football at any level finishes the season intact.
Yeah, and there's more players too. I mean, they're closer. There's more players, and you're asking, you know, 50 plus players and 20 plus staff to just bubble on their own, and that's not going to happen. Times all the teams across all the levels, as you mentioned. Like, I'm still in shock that high school football is moving forward. I know there's a staggered start for all the districts, but I'm still shocked by that. We've seen it this week, David, with college football, that when there was just the student athletes, it was all good, right? The tests were really low, or the positive results from the test were really low. And now when you introduce students back on campus, a lot of campuses are like, okay, we can't do this. You guys got to go back to online learning, and we'll kind of figure it out. This is going to be it's obviously uncharted territories for everything, but this is going to be so interesting to watch how teams handle this on every level.
Yeah, I don't know how high schools do it. I mean, I'd love to see them go to the spring. I mean, I wish they'd made that call and that everybody was just going to play in the spring. I know that can impact baseball, but you know, you could have moved baseball to the fall, right? I mean, baseball, it's essentially a non-contact sport. You could have moved baseball to the fall because a lot of kids do both and played football in the spring. I mean, I know logistically that's difficult, but how is that any more difficult than what they're trying to accomplish right now? I mean, my son's school, I think, you know, they're they push back the start. They're 6A. So my understanding is, and he's in the band, so they're only going to home games. I think they're going to be sitting on the visitor side so that there can be some spectators. They're going to separate and spread out. It's, if you can coordinate all of that, just move to the spring. But again, I'm not an athletic director,
No.
and I'm not a medical expert either. So,
Tom, man, I've told you in person, I'll say it on the show, man, you're one of my favorites to work with, to talk to. We talk everything, as I said in the intro, man, and it's just it's about time we get you on the show, man. It was so much fun having you on here. I think Rahil's got something for you. I'm sorry.
We want to do the same 5 questions with you. We ask the same 5 questions to every guest, all right? And we usually do it to start, but I want to ask you now since we have some time. Number 1, what is one song you wish everybody would listen to at least once in their life?
One song. Los Angelinos by Billy Joel.
All right. Billy Joel. That's our first Billy Joel, Nuno. I don't think we've ever had anybody respond. No, that's not a bad
says
thing.
about me.
No, it just says stuff about
Can I be honest, though?
Yeah.
I feel really bad because I don't know the name of most songs. So every time we've done this question and people say their thing, I don't have a witty response. I'm just like, oh, okay, next.
Yeah.
I just don't know songs anymore. I know Billy's a Hall of Famer, but continue on, Rahil.
All right, number 2. What is one thing you always have to have in your fridge?
Good question. We almost always have like berries in our fridge, like strawberries, blackberries, blueberries, and just grab a handful and eat them.
I'm with you. Rank your berries.
Tom.
Yeah.
Tom, just so you understand, Rahil and I have this game that I don't know if the viewers know. Anytime somebody says good question, we give them a point. He's destroying me right now, 3-0. That's why he did the 3. So I'm getting destroyed on the good question. So I'm just telling you that just in case I ask one last one. All right, go ahead, Rahil.
Good point.
Yo, raspberries number 1, blueberries number 2, antioxidants, and then blackberry 3, strawberry 4.
I'll do that, except I'll flip blueberries with raspberries just because they're with raspberries, you're more likely to get stuff all over your hands.
Yeah.
If you just grab them. But yes, I mean, strawberries are the last of the 4.
Yeah. Strawberries are good for smoothies. That's it.
Yeah.
That's about it. Yeah, like just a little light flavor. Salad, yes. A nice strawberry salad is always good with a vinaigrette.
A nice strawberry salad. That's almost like calling out a Billy Joel song when asked about it.
All right, number 3. What's one place you want to visit that you haven't yet?
Peru.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, Machu Picchu.
Yeah. Man, that'd be awesome to see. Great deals right now, Tom, if you want to travel.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. I don't want to get in trouble. Number 4, who's one person alive that you want to meet and have coffee with?
Will Ferrell.
Ooh,
That'd be a good one.
that's a really good one.
Yeah.
I wonder if he's in character at all times. Like, does Will Ferrell always do the Will Ferrell, or does he kind of take a step back?
I don't know. Good question, David.
No, don't give him a pretty good question, Tom. Don't do that.
I don't know. But I just find him so ridiculously stupid and funny that I think having a conversation with him over coffee would be good.
It would be so much fun to dive into the website Funny or Die and like how he started that and how that really did start a lot of the viral content on the internet. I know YouTube is number 1 and all that, but Funny or Die was one of the original websites that launched the concept of viral.
Yeah, and the streaming video, I still laugh at the one with him where the kid comes to the door and yells at him. Anyway.
Where's my rent? Yeah. All right, last one. What's one app that you want to delete from your phone, but you just can't?
Facebook.
Yep.
Yeah. It's always social media sites.
Yeah, always. I'm not, you have to be on it. But it's not my favorite.
Cool, man. Tom, thank you so much, man. We appreciate you taking time out. My wife and my daughter love watching you on Sundays. They don't like watching David as much, but we watch for you, and we love your sign off, man. It's quickly just tell people what it is, and it's something so simple yet so powerful.
Funny, I've gotten a lot of surprisingly a lot of comments about that. So thank you for saying something. And David, always good working with you. Rahil, great to talk to you too.
All right, man. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
Bye, guys. Yep.
Good stuff there with Tommy Abrams. One of my favorite people in the world, man. I love talking to him. His insight. He loves sports. And anytime there's a Batman thing out in the news, we're talking about it on the set. I mean, it's like you get our hot mic. We're talking Marvel. We're talking DC. It happens often.
That's cool, man. I didn't know Tom was into comic book movies like us. So now I know to include him in conversations we have.
Yeah, those are the things. So now the guys in the sports office, they give me this look when I bring up Batman, like, what a loser is what they, but I got to do it, man. I got to keep it real.
Yeah. So I used to get killed about this on sports radio, where we would talk about Marvel movies and comic book movies, right? And I've had programming directors tell us, like, you shouldn't, like, let's not talk about it sometimes. And by the way, you're going to hear from one of our program directors that both of us had, Chance McClain, in just a second. But they would always say, like, I don't know if you want to talk about this. And I'm like, really? Because I think 1 billion people watch the movies. It's not like this is a niche anymore. This is huge. Comic book movies are huge now.
They are, man. And there's a lot of bad things during the pandemic. A lot. Okay. I don't mean to minimize anything. But one of the things, and hello, Tony, one of the things that it's just a lot of movies have stopped, right? So there was a report yesterday that I think that Robert Pattinson's The Batman, the new one, is going to start refilming or pick up filming again at the end of the month. That's been put on hold. So many movies have not come out because of the pandemic. So many movies have not started shooting or had to been paused. Who knows what's going to be? Look, there's a lot bigger things to worry about in the world. Well, there's a couple things that, like when we get back to normal, and I believe we will, these are the things that I miss and I cherish.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you. So 13 years ago, David, you and I met for the first time ever in 2007. And it was in June, July, August. I think it was early August. You and I met for the first time ever because we had both agreed to work at a startup radio station called 1560 The Game. Now, it was truly a startup. I mean, you could barely hear it sometimes, all right? But it was a group of guys, and you and I we were doing a weekend show at the time, a sports radio show, and we just hit it off. We became like best friends out the gate, right? And then we met the rest of the team, and we all became best friends, and it became this journey that we all went on together. And now we're all scattered all over the place, doing great things professionally. So today is the 13-year anniversary, August 20th. And you and I thought it'd be a good idea to bring on our original programming director, Chance McClain.
So it's funny. Like, I think we've had very blessed careers, Raheel. But 13 years ago, nobody knew who I was, who you. Sean Pendergast, who's a big time host at 610 Sports Radio 610. He was. I don't want to say a nobody because he was a somebody, but he was a caller on the Jim Rome show and a Smack-Off winner. John Harris, who's the Texans sideline reporter, he has become not only is he a brainiac back then, but he has turned out to do amazing things. Ken Hoffman, Richard Justice, Del Olale, and everybody knows about John Granado and Lance Zierlein, the two best sports radio personalities in the history of this city. And we all came together to start this amazing radio station. No longer with us, but 1560 The Game KGAL really was a how would you phrase it, Raheel? I know with Chance we talk about it, but more of a renegade radio / we're going to do things different, and it's going to be way different.
Yeah, at the time in 2007, the only thing different happening in sports radio was a Jim Rome show, right? Like, he was edgier with his takes, the way he talked. But outside of that, it was very, let's just talk sports, and that's it. Like, we're not going to do anything else. 1560 The Game was, let's just talk about life. And if sports are part of your life, cool. If not, talk about your favorite pizza joint. Talk about your favorite movie. It's all good. Like, just talk about who you are and entertain people.
The way we do this show, so those who are just catching us for the first time wondering, why am I watching this? Raheel and I have been doing a version of this show for 13 years in some way, shape, or form. Sometimes they would be one-offs. It's always been called No Layups when we work up. Well, actually, let me rephrase that. The very first show we ever did together was called The Scene, okay? Yep. And not like the scene, like the place to be. We were a weekend morning sports talk show when we started, Saturday mornings and Sunday mornings. And usually it was, a lot of tool shows on at that time, not a lot of sports radio on that time. We gave Houston something to listen to, and we always had, what was it? The question, it wasn't the question of the day, but we had like the interesting non-sports question of the day, whatever it was. And we would be like top 10 movies, and we'd play clips. We had so much fun on the air, Raheel. and it really has kind of molded us into who we are now. And we mentioned this to Chance. I don't go a week without somebody mentioning something from those days.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I think this next interview, if you are a fan of Houston sports radio, if you did listen to 1560 The Game, you're going to enjoy this.
All right, and our guest is Chance McClain, who is not only one of our good friends. He's was our boss. He hired us. He convinced John Granado that we were two guys to take a chance on. Hello, Chancey.
What's up, guys? Man, it's good to see y'all.
Good to see you, man.
Happy 13 years.
Gosh, 13 years. I saw Harris post on social media this morning, 13 years ago today, and I was just 13 years. Unbelievable.
It's amazing when you think about. So those who don't know about 1560, what would we say, Chance? It's a pirate radio station that was real, but we acted like we were illegitimate mobsters doing radio. Is that a good way?
Yeah, it was a combination of overconfidence and thinking nobody was listening. So you had half the people there that assumed everybody's listening, and then half of us was like, there's nobody listening, so we have a carte blanche to do whatever we want. And then it just turned out that whatever we want was damned entertaining.
And one of the crazy things to, as we look back is now we all celebrate the startup energy, right? Like there's so many different startups. Everyone wants to be part of a startup. But in 2007, that term was almost like, what? That's like, hey, go back to San Francisco, okay, with that startup stuff.
Exactly.
Austin, right? But it truly was a startup and a startup energy in that, yes, it was a group of people just trying to make it in a media landscape that was already saturated. And then the part that still boggles my mind is the experience of the people that were there, right? Like from you, John Granado, Lance Erline, there was legit experience there doing radio. And then you've got guys like David Nuno, myself, where we did radio, but not on this level. Sean Pendergast, John Harris, Ken Hoffman, Richard Justice. It was incredible as we look back, like, what? How did this lineup even work? How did this station work?
It was just a magic combination of people and some chances. Like Raheel, you brought an energy when you were interning at 610, this infectious energy and a level of creativity I'd never seen before in the broadcast world. Again, fearlessness. You're like, if it works, it'll be great. If it doesn't work, so what? We move on to the next one. It's live radio. And Nuno had this polished professional television side. On the air, he was all this, but as soon as the camera's off, he's the most approachable, regular, hilarious, fun, playful, silly, irreverent dude in the world. And you guys were, y'all. Look at this. 13 years later, y'all are still doing things together, and it was like that from day one. And then the different Justice and Hoffy, again, that one was more like, let's take two things that are really, really different and force them together and see what happens. Sean, obviously from his Jim Rome days, he had proven he had chops. He'd just never been given a chance. And Harris had been doing radio with Lance and John forever as a guest. There was some magic chemistry that happened there for a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to understand the why and how. Like, you weren't officially with the station when we got hired, but you certainly had, 13 years later, we could talk about it. You had at least the ears of people who were hiring. So, like, why did you take such a chance on a Sean Pendergast who had never hosted a radio show, on a John Harris, same level, Nuno or Raheel, and even putting Justice in a different kind of role? And Ken Hoffman, who's always been a complimentary, he was outstanding as a lead host. How did you guys come up with, that methodology?
It was just a combination of contrasting things and seemingly natural fits. Again, the guys had all done at least a little bit. Their voices had been on the radio. They weren't intimidated by it. And you look at somebody like Sean, who had a history of success in the corporate world. Guys don't do that by chance. They do it because they work. And Harris always outworked everybody. He would make these 200-page dossiers on players that nobody cares about, because that's his obsession. And the gamble was, can we translate that obsession into radio content? And it didn't feel like much of a gamble at the time. And there was also the element of, this has to work. And if it doesn't, we fail. And that type of pressure makes some good things can come out of that.
I remember when I first started there and David would talk to me. David is my big brother. You guys all, like, I was 22 at the time, fresh out of college, and I'm working with people that have so much experience, not only in radio, but in life and corporate world, all that. But David, I remember telling me, like, you don't understand how good you have it here in terms of a job, right? Like, you get to come in and hang out with your brothers, not friends, like your brothers. You get to hang out with them, and we all knew about each other's lives, and we would hang out together as much as possible. I think that was a big part of why we were successful, is because of the atmosphere that we all created at the station. It wasn't a 9 to 5 clock in and clock out and go home and never think about work. This was just life, and it just happened to be we got paid. Not that much, but we got paid. Okay, we got paid. I think that was a huge reason as well.
One of the things I felt proud of that we as a team did was the chemistry of everybody, not just individual islands of shows. And then just as important was what Frank Bullington did as the kind of creative guy that obviously he was on the air a lot too, but he and I would treat our stop sets, our commercial breaks. Normally everybody punches it, they're going somewhere else. But we were like, no, let's make the commercial breaks entertaining. And that includes the commercials. So the clients would call up and be like, hey, we want to sell whatever they're selling. All furniture, whatever, a furniture store. And they would send us their commercials, and we would just send back, hey, this isn't good. We need to rethink this commercial because it's boring. And clients would be like, that's rude. What about the client's always right? And we're like, well, do you want people to hear your spot? Let's have some fun with it. And the station promos and all that stuff. So you mix in entertaining stop sets with John and Lance are friends with Richard and Hoffy. At one point that was the lineup. So the handoff, the handshake between shows, it bonded, and it would carry listeners across through the day. And that, to me, is one of the other things that made us really different.
True story. I still have people, and I would say often once a week, say double rods to me, no layups. Hey, I remember you with Raheel. Where are you now? Like, what? What? But to this day, we definitely had it. But I got to ask about this. I was there for most of them, but the blue light. All right. How did blue light become a thing?
Oh my gosh. So
and what is blue light? Tell everybody what blue light was.
So for the uninitiated, the Blue Light Cemetery is a reportedly haunted cemetery in Houston. Frank and I grew up in different parts of Houston, about 6 years apart. He's a little older 4 years apart. He's a little older than I am. He looks 10 years younger, though, still does. And we realized that we both, from these different sides of Houston, had the same stories of lore about the Blue Light Cemetery. And so whenever we were going through some station upgrades, we went up at night at like midnight and fired up the transmitter and just started doing an improvisational show called the Blue Light Cemetery Show. And it was ostensibly to test the strength of the new signal, the new night signal that was going to be increased. And it just turned into madness. It was generally alcohol was involved. And random guests, just the most random stuff in the ever. And the most surprising thing ever was firing it up. We never told anybody about it. We just turned the signal on, and people started showing up in the chat room, and it's 1 o'clock in the morning. And some of our P1 listeners, some of the Secret Society guys, the Double Rods guys, they're listening. I'm like, why were you listening to the crap that was on the air? What are you doing? And then it built up a little audience. And so over the course of maybe 18 months or so, we would periodically go up there on a random Tuesday night, get a couple bottles of bourbon, and have us a little show.
It's funny you brought up the listeners. That was incredible to watch. And David, you mentioned them as well. Like, they still come up to you and say double rods or no layups. Our listeners, man, I can't believe how lucky we got with that passionate group of listeners. It wasn't the biggest group of listeners, But man, that group was fierce. They would host parties together, scavenger hunts, and get married, and like they would sometimes we would even give listeners shows, and that resulted in some of them having a radio career. And Barry Laminack, like he ended up working in radio for a while. Like it's
Cougars Tonight.
Cougars Tonight.
Cougars Tonight. Kevin G. Joseph, who worked a Dubai trip out of all of this. He got a free trip to Dubai. Our listeners, man, they were incredible. They showed up to the Mug Awards. We did an annual awards on August 20th where we would have hundreds of listeners come celebrate the radio station.
Yeah, the T-shirts at Academy, and they sold 10,000 shirts. What the? Who does that? They were passionate, and they kept us going. I had this little rule as a programmer, and I called it my 5% rule, and it was spend 5% of your time super serving a small segment. So a good example was, here we are, we're sports radio, we're beers, balls, and babes is what you mostly talk about in that male dominant format. Except we would have this additional little thing, and we did it with nerdy stuff, with Star Wars, with Lord of the Rings. Granado's a big Lord of the Rings dork, so we would do Lord of the Rings. And by doing those little bitty things, by incorporating those type of elements into promos and into elements of the show, that dork out there that also, that loves the Astros and loves Tracy McGrady, he also is really super into the Clone Wars, Star Wars show, right? And so by incorporating those little elements, they hold on and wait for those to come up. And I think that played a part in that bonding that happened between the staff and the audience. And it was an authentic bond. Several of those guys are my closest friends right now. They were listeners to the show. Contributors would text or email or participate in the chat room. They become my friends, like my real friends.
You hit on an interesting point there, Chance. But you started off as a listener as well in the 610 days. Yeah. So like that was the beauty of what we put together there at 1560 The Game. You tell everybody how you got involved, because you would call John and Lance and you would send them bits, and kind of how that morphed into something bigger.
Sure. So John and Lance had the show. I had just gotten out of the Army. I was back in Houston.
I
was in Fort Lewis, Washington, and there was a sports radio station, KJR, and I just started listening to sports radio. Moved to Houston and dialed around until I found the only thing at the time, and John and Lance had just got fired up. And this is in the days of faxes, so I would send faxes in, and no email yet, none of that stuff. I would send faxes in, and apparently was clever enough to have them read on air and show up at some station events, because John and Lance have an ability that's so unique to make the audience a part. You feel like they're your friends. They really do. So you'd show up at an event and get to know the guys a little bit. And then my brother and I did an event, Slapfest, which at the time on what was it called? It was Fox Sports Southwest. They had a promo running of saying, we show local sports. We don't show sports you don't want to see. And it was these two Russian guys slapping each other in the face. And I called in and I said, I disagree. I would love to see that. That would be a blast. And John and Lance were like, yeah, that'd be awesome. Well, my brother was listening and he called in and he's like, I'd love to watch that too. So now we're both on the air. And Granado's like, well, hey, y'all are brothers. Why don't let's do this? Y'all want to slap each other? And we agreed. And so we went and did Slapfest, and it was a mayhem. There's footage of it out there, and this is two brothers with a lot of aggression. We did the first one at a Hooters and just mauled each other. Just literally, it went from slaps to closed fist punches in the face, sitting across the table. And then so I did that. We did a couple of other events. I got involved, and then I was always jerking around with music, and I made a song about Matt Bullard and Moochie Norris. Then I did the song about Yao Ming, based on the Olay soccer chant, and it kind of took off, and it really took off. It went viral before things went viral. It was on SportsCenter. David Letterman's show played it. It was like a big old deal. And I had lost a job in the oil company because I was bad at it, and I had gone to a full-time substitute teacher and I was waiting tables at Chili's, and I had this song that was all over the radio, that was everywhere. And it was kind of humbling for me to be in that. And Zerline called me up and said, "Hey, there's a creative director position open at 610. You should apply for it." So I did. I applied for it and got the job. And then, within a couple of years of being at 610, it was like a duck in water. I loved it. I loved creating stuff. I loved working with the guys. I loved finding you, Raheel. John McClain was a big help in everything I did. He was just one of my champions. He's how I found you, David. And the corporate lifestyle didn't fit me. I didn't like it, but I loved the guys and I loved the format. I loved what we were doing. And that's when the secret talks started happening about maybe let's try to go do this on our own. And then, so about 3 years after I started at 610, we fired up 1560.
Man, I want to take the time real quickly, because I know we are running out of time on this interview, to talk about something that's really important to me right now and important to a lot of people in the world, is diversity, right? The importance of diversity in everything we do, right? And it's not just giving somebody a position because they're a minority or because they look a certain way, but you guys took the chance and did this in a format that traditionally is all white males. Like even now, when you look at sports radio lineups, it's a specific looking host serving people that don't look like them anymore, right? Because the model has changed a little bit. But thinking back in 2007, when this wasn't even a conversation, you took a chance not only on a couple of minorities, but one in a Pakistani American. Like, I was born in Pakistan. I'm a Houstonian, but it was incredible to get that shot. So I want to thank you, John, everyone, for not only giving me the shot, but for doing something really important in putting somebody in a position to succeed, being a minority in a field that normally doesn't get a shot.
Right. I got to tell you, dude, I'm a big believer in a meritocracy, and I don't care. I knew you as an intern. I liked you. It didn't matter. And it still doesn't matter. I think if you just do things based on what you believe somebody's capable of, irrespective of the stuff that God put on them, it works out. And it's true. We had that. But I don't remember it ever being I don't remember it being a thing. I remember being nervous post 9/11 with your name.
Yeah.
So it's not like we're oblivious to that being important. But whatever apprehension we had, it's like, what are we talking about? This is America, man.
It's funny though. As early as last year, I talked to somebody in the industry, and the exact thing he told me was, it's something that we'll have to kind of navigate. Like, how do I explain to my listeners that there's a Raheel Ramzanali talking to me, and it's like, I think.
How about this? How about you trust your listeners, and the listeners that would give a damn about that type of stuff, tell them to go jump off a pier.
Yeah. So just wanted to bring that up, because I think that's a really important thing that isn't talked about with 1560 The Game.
Well, that's good.
Chance, parting shots here. So how, and I think there's some good and bad of how 1560 changed the game. All right. There's maybe a little bit too much guy talk, but talk a little bit about how 1560 did change this market and the way sports radio is done. I don't want to say in the country, but there was repercussions in a good way of what we did.
I think that the phrase going back to my time at CBS was, it's guy talk. You want to do guy talk. And it was this forced formulaic beers, babes, and balls. Like, that was kind of the thing. And instead of doing guy talk, we just expressed our natural personalities. Our content was an expression of the host. It was authentic. It wasn't personas. It was real people putting on shows. So the content, it covered the gamut. And it just so happens that all of us were enough into sports that it was predominantly sports. That's what, if we were hanging out at a company picnic and we all worked somewhere else and we happened to be clustered together, Harris would be talking about, the quick twitch of some some backup guard at Montana State. That's what he'd be talking about. And that's so I don't know how to address that exactly, other than what we tried to do was be an expression of reality with a genius, lovely collection of guys that had authentic care for one another and care for the audience. And that was just expressed via the radio. And by the way, before anybody else was doing it, online streaming, videos in there, chat rooms, all that stuff. We were trying to embrace new technology at the same time with some ratchet equipment.
I still have my flip cam somewhere. That's how we did no layups. We did it on a flip cam that was, I think, 3 megapixels. That was it.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Man.
I mean, think about what you just said there, Raheel. We did no layups, video shows like this that we're doing right now with the big ABC 13 logo behind us, or sometimes behind us. And we did that in 2007 with a flip cam. Same kind of show.
Yeah.
Yep. We knew what was coming.
Yeah, and editing on a netbook. Shout out to the netbooks.
The Chromebook. Remember that little thing?
Yeah, that was called the
gosh.
netbook, remember?
It was the baby computer.
It was a baby computer, and it was like $300. That was my first computer I bought with my paycheck, and it was it was like the size of this. Hold on, let me get like a size of this sheet of paper. That's how big it was.
Yeah,
it was
I remember.
Man, Chance, thank you so much for taking time out.
Thank you, guys. Hey,
I love it.
I appreciate you guys calling me. I sincerely love both of you guys to death. It sounds patronizing, but it's not. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of myself for helping get you guys involved, and Granado and Frank and the whole team there. And just to see you guys do such amazing things, it's wonderful. I love you all to death. And we need to, I can't say get a beer, but I need to get a beer and you guys can have some coffee.
Hey, as we're saying goodbye, I got to say, give some props to the people that we didn't bring up. Dell, obviously, Olale, who was a huge part of what we did. Richard Topper, a big part of what we did. And, of course, the Beastmaster, Dade. Got to give Dade more his love.
Dade, got to give Dade, Rodney Wright. You got all the heroes, man. Kyle Manthe, come on.
Kyle.
The Taskmaster.
Yeah. What's up, Kyle?
Hey,
Noonie Oaks?
The other Noonie.
Noonie Oaks, absolutely. Yeah.